Welcome to the podcast. This is ScottCast, the podcast. We think the 12. Yeah.
One of them.
Ashley's here with me today because Michael's in Norway. Or Denmark. Some Norwegian country.
I didn't know he was all the way out there.
Yeah, so you're filling in for him today, and I appreciate that.
A little different take than he would have. But.
That's true. Well, you're coming at it from a different place, and he's obviously coming at it from an advisor standpoint, but I think that your questions will be more along the lines of what we would get from quote-unquote regular people. You are a regular person.
Regular.
Yeah, okay.
For the most part.
So I know you read the book and had some questions and made some marks and highlighted the whole book, I'm sure, and shared it with all your friends. And,
Absolutely.
So were there some takeaways that you wanted to cover a little bit today?
Well, I think what's interesting is we were talking about before this, is, we are a different kind of group of people now, in the 20s, 30s, even some 40s, coming out of school, having student loans, really having not, I think, a deep understanding of what we should be doing or even where to start.
Yeah, I think it's overwhelming, right? I mean, I was young once, believe it or not. It was a while ago, to be fair, but I remember coming out of college and I knew I was going to be a financial advisor, but I still didn't have the faintest idea what that meant. Mm-hmm. And I certainly didn't have a firm grasp on how to become financially successful. And when you say become financially successful, I don't really know what that conjures up for people your age anymore. For me, I grew up in the 80s, so it was kind of Wall Street, Gordon Gekko, Charlie Sheen. That didn't work out so well for Charlie Sheen, but although I think he is wealthy. He's crazy, but he's also wealthy. But that, to me, to my generation, that was kind of the push, was to be financially, basically to be rich. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I understood what that meant or how to get there. I felt like at that time, having come through the Wall Street generation and the excesses, if you will, of the 80s, that there was some magic secret I was going to learn, and if I was close enough to Wall Street and people who worked on Wall Street, I would eventually find it out, and by the time I was the ripe old age of 35 or 36, I'd be retired, and it would all end in some kind of fantasy way. Clearly that didn't happen, but I did actually learn accidentally along the way how to do it the right way, and those are a lot of the things that I've put in the book. And I think for young people, there's just too many confusing messages out there, and I'm trying to address those.
Mm-hmm. I think a good place to start, right, I guess, with this younger crowd is most of these people are coming out of school, 22, getting a decent job, but guess what? We all have student loans now, as opposed to our parents who a lot of the times were working their way through, paying for school, were able to make some money still, where I know I had to work while I was in school, full-time school, full-time work. Right. Not everybody had to do that.
Not as much a thing anymore.
I know.
Yeah.
But, I still have student loans to pay.
Sure.
I came out thinking, what's $500 a month back then?
Right.
But now when you get out of school, real life starts to hit. That is a lot, because now you got living expenses, you got other bills to pay for. So I guess that would be a good place of where to start. Coming out of school, we got student loans, now what?
Well, and I'm going to back up even further than that if I can, and don't let me forget to come back to that. But you and I were talking earlier before we started filming about parents, I think, do their children accidentally a disservice now. Mm-hmm. I don't know when it happened, but at some point in the last decade or maybe even further back, parents became convinced it was some kind of status symbol or somehow important that their kids didn't work. Or that their kids got done with school in exactly 4 years so they could tell their friends down at the country club they were done and on to their graduate degrees or whatever it was they were going to do. I worked the entire time I went to college. My wife worked 3 jobs at one point on her way to a PhD. In her case, she graduated on time. In my case, I was a few beers shy of graduating on time. The point is, you don't have to graduate in 4 years. You don't have to take a full course load. You can work and take 3 semester hours a semester. Go to a community college first. I mean, this whole notion that we're being sold on Ivy League schools or out-of-state schools or out-of-state tuition or a liberal arts degree for $48,000 a year, I won't name the school, but I know one exists, that's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And then on top of it, you say, well, I'm going to go out of state. I'm going to get a liberal arts degree. I'm going to spend 40 grand a year on that, forget even living expenses. And then when I come out of college, because my parents could only afford 20 grand a year, I now owe somebody $150,000, right? At some astronomical 7, 8, I don't even know what the rate is anymore.
It's higher than that.
What if you had just stayed in state, gone to a community college, worked part-time, and oh, by the way, while you're working, you're getting experience in the real world, right? Because a lot of my friends who didn't work in college came out and got their first jobs at 23, 24 years. I've been working since I was 14 years old. I wasn't intimidated by interviews. I wasn't intimidated by people who were more successful than me. I wasn't afraid to state my opinion. I wasn't afraid to take risk. Whereas what we're teaching young people is, no, don't work. That's too risky. You might not get a good grade. Or if you don't finish in 4 years, someone will think less of you, or whatever. I really don't know what the snake oil is, but I see a lot of it. To your point, when you get out of college, again, it kind of has to start while you're in. You have to have some kind of guidance, and clearly our young people are not getting it right now, or we wouldn't have the student debt problems that we have, which is keeping people, by the way, from buying houses, being able to live fulfilling lives. I think it's leading to social upheaval to some degree. I think some of these conflicts you see in politics is because young people don't see the future older people clearly had, and it's because they've been taught the wrong thing. So coming out of college, you just need to be aware of that debt situation, and if you've already created it, obviously we can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. But what we can do is not get caught up in, well, I need a new car now because I've graduated from college, or I need to buy a house tomorrow. You don't need to do any of that. First of all, an interesting trend is that we're living longer, right? People as recently as 20 or 30 years ago were dying pretty regularly in their early 70s. Now our lifespans are well into the mid 80s. So that means you shouldn't be in such a hurry. It's going to be okay. You're going to have time to get a new car and get a new house. But getting all caught up in, well, you know, my friends next door got one, and my buddy got married and bought a house, and there's no hurry on any of that. And as I say in the book, one of the things that we teach young people in college especially is how to be two things. One, an employee, and two, a consumer. And if you think that those two things aren't linked, you're wrong. Because what happens is we give these people quote unquote good jobs, and they're making 30, 40, 50, 60 grand a year, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But we also teach them they need stuff, and they need stuff right now. And what that does to that person that's making even a $50,000 or $60,000 a year salary is it already puts them behind the eight ball. So the next year they got to make 63, and the next year they got to make 66, and so on and so forth. And if they don't, it's stressful. Why should a person coming out of college making 60 grand a year be stressed out? But this is what we're teaching people to do, consumers and employees.
It is that side of we need stuff, right? We need to keep up with the Joneses. We need to have the car. We need to have, and like you said, it is, I think, college in general is that status of you do need to go to school. You do need to be out in 4 years. You got to come out. You got to have a good job. You got to buy the house. And it's like a pressure. And I think a lot of people are afraid to take that step back and have that patience of doing things right.
Oh, there's a ton of pressure. I mean, there was pressure when I was that age. There was pressure to do those things. I just don't know that there were the facilities, for lack of a better word, to get us in so much trouble that we couldn't get out of it. I remember my first credit card application came to me in Gainesville one day, and it was, I think the credit limit was like $200. And I could not sign that paperwork fast enough, nor get to the quarter beer night after it came fast enough once I got it. But nobody was saying, we're going to loan you $100,000 so that you can also still go to quarter beer night, which is what I would have done. So I just don't think there was the opportunity to get in as much trouble. And I don't know how that changed or why that changed, but it clearly has. So I think for young people to focus while they're in college, and more importantly for their parents to understand this dynamic and not get caught up in those sort of things. And even, as people age and they have children, they get caught up in these things. My kids both attended a fancy pants private school here in town, which I certainly did when I was a kid. But I was always marvel when I was younger. My son, who's now 25, he was in kindergarten or second or third grade, and I would hear some parents say, well, we got to get a new house. The wife's pregnant. I know for a fact they live in like a 3,500 square foot house, and all I could think was, how big is this child you're having that you need an entire new house because it's being born? But these are the things we convince ourselves of. That's not to say college isn't important, because it is. It's very important. You can learn a lot in college. So you can learn how to be an adult in a somewhat controlled environment. But the idea that you have to graduate in 4 years, that you have to go to Target before you get your apartment and have the drapes match the sheets and get all this pottery. Again, as I said to you earlier, what happened to cinder blocks and milk crates, right? Because that's certainly what I had on a good day. So those things are good for young people. It's good for young people to struggle. It's good for them to see that everything isn't going to be handed to them. And we've also taken that. And then when they get out of college and that stops, because the real world doesn't work like that, you don't get to go with mom and dad to Target anymore. It can be traumatic and upsetting to people. And I think it leads to a lot of the, also, I'm going to go there, a lot of the mental health issues we have with young people today.
So to kind of speed it up there too, we dug the hole, right? And then in your book, which I like that you kind of give a good basis of all the products out there, but also you say, how do you know when to start? And you say, when you have the money.
Yes.
Right? So how do we get to that point of having money to start?
Yeah.
And then how do we know when to start?
Well, a common refrain, and it was true when I was young in the business, was, well, Scott, I'd like to give you $50 a month, but I'm going to wait till I can do 500. That day's never coming. And it's an excuse not to start with the 50, right? Because if you're 22 or you're 23 years old and you say $50 a month, when you're old, you will have a lot of money. I can promise you that. But if you say, well, I'm going to wait till I have 500 or 300 or 700, some arbitrary number, the odds of you getting there are not very high. That is basically an avoidance behavior. So when I say when you have the money, I don't care what it is, 10, 15, 20, it goes into a savings account. I don't care where you put it. The products really don't matter at this point. Right now, you're a saver. This is the other thing that drives me crazy about Wall Street or the investment industry, is that we've convinced people that if they pick the best mutual fund or the best stock or get the lowest fees or have the best robo thing on their phone, that saving isn't really all that important. But the truth of the matter is none of that is important until you start to save. You're a saver, in my opinion, until you have $10, $15, $20, $30,000 accumulated. Because you're wasting your time. If you give me $1,000 today, and I invest your money for free, and I double it in the first week. That's a fantastic return. But guess what? You still can't retire because now you have $2,000. So again, saving is the key component. In 401k meetings all the time I talk about this, is because participants have been convinced by the media and to some degree legislators that 401ks, for example, I'm just using an example, are evil. Well, I'm not sure what's evil about them. They're just an opportunity to save money. They're a bucket to put money in. And when you tell people that, that's all they need to hear, not to save, right? Well, so-and-so on the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal said, these are evil, therefore I don't have to save. And I will tell you what I tell my son all the time. Cynicism is a tool of avoidance as well. Well, if it sucks, you can keep that in, right? Well, if it sucks, I don't have to do it, right? Well, your vegetables kind of suck sometimes too. You still need to eat them. So that's the way I look at that.
Interesting. Yeah, I think obviously in your book you go in, and I'll tell you this right now, any young person could read this book that doesn't have a lot of knowledge, that wants to learn more about products and services and really what a financial advisor does too, because I think that's a whole other conversation.
It is.
But then also anybody that has a lot of knowledge, because you break it down in such a no BS kind of way, I
don't know any other way.
Really, right? And it just helps so much. And I think especially just from this conversation too, anything a young person could be doing at this point is just really important, because retirement is there and it is on everybody's mind, whether you're 22 coming out of school, or like you said, 50-year-old wanting to start retiring now.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and it's never too late. And it's not just about retirement. I think sometimes as an industry we focus solely on retirement. It's just easy to talk about and tangible, I suppose. But there's saving for a home. There's saving for a kid's college education. There's maximizing your tax implications of investing. There's so many things that are investing encompasses other than just retirement. There's a cash reserve. How much cash should I have on hand? Well, you should have some. You shouldn't invest all your money, because if you invest all your money, the other side of the coin is sometimes people will be overzealous and they'll say, well, I have $500 a month in discretionary income, right? And they want to give me the whole 500. Here's the problem, that when the transmission goes out or the air conditioner blows up, guess where they're coming? They're coming to me. I don't want them in their investments. I don't want them to touch their investments, because the market could be down that day and now I have to give them back only part of their money. People tend not to like that, right? So you want to put yourself in a position where you can leave your long-term investments, you can leave them the space to go through the ebbs and flows that they're normally going to go through.